Very well, let's get started. Welcome to today's video. Today we will explain how to make a fully automated podcast and upload it to Spotify using n8n. So the workflow that I have created consists of three main blocks. There are some of the blocks are completely modular, meaning there are some points that we can skip directly if you already have some of the. No, it's not strictly necessary to use them all. And in the end, it is also designed to adapt to different use cases. Then we will show an example of what can be done. But the idea is to have a set of tools that allow us to later build the podcast that we want, right? In this example, we have divided it into three clear blocks. In the first block, what we do is build or curate information that is already available on the internet and convert it into a newsletter. In the case that you already have the newsletter or have a blog post or an article that you directly want to use as a base, you could skip this part. But if you would really be interested in taking different sources of information, mixing them and making a summary, and with that summary making your podcast, well, this is what I think is quite interesting. In this case, we will do it with a Reddit thread, but well, this could be extrapolated to many more use cases, for example, in other blogs or content from different pages or newspapers, etc., right? In the second block, basically what it does is continue on take a written content, which can be a newsletter, a blog post, or an article, and pass it through artificial intelligence. In this case, we will use OpenAI, and what we do is generate a script that is entertaining and that is divided between two people, somewhat inspired by what Google does with Notebook-LM. And this, through a sequence, we build it using ElevenLabs, and then we put all these parts together and make a summary, a final file, all with the compiled audio. Then we send this audio to the third block. And in this third block, what we basically do is make this information visible in different audio players, which can be from Spotify, Apple Podcast, whatever you consider, or whatever you prefer to use. Basically, what it does is update the RSS file, which is the file where these players are usually connected, and it updates it. In this case, we have hosted the file on GitHub, but really you could adapt it to whatever you think is necessary, okay? So basically the idea, as I mentioned earlier, is that this template serves as a base, and then we can build on top of it whatever we deem necessary. Important, if you have any questions, any comments, something, any point where it's not clear to you, you can always leave it in the comments. I will try to respond as soon as possible, and for those who don't want to get in so much mess and are really looking directly for a way to recycle content and turn it into a podcast, or create your podcast from scratch, and don't have technical knowledge or don't have knowledge of n8n, you can always contact me at my email, and I also offer the service of helping you to build your own podcast, right? So what use cases, what could we use for, or what could we build, or what could we offer through this, right? Basically, the inspiration was on a personal level. I am a person who consumes a lot of written content, and I don't have time. So what I do is create my own personalized podcast. I have different sources of information through an n8n workflow. I summarize it, send it to myself by email. Then this email generates the podcast, and it automatically becomes my channel where I can consume information that interests me. This is on a personal level. If you're thinking about how this can help a business, for example, a good use case would also be recycling information that the page already has. For instance, there are many e-commerce sites that have blog posts where they are very well positioned in terms of SEO on Google. And why not use all that information already curated, worked on, to make a podcast, right? And so in such a way that you not only have an acquisition channel through Google SEO, but also on other audio platforms. Moreover, audio is gaining quite a bit of traction. It's a format where usually there isn't as much, it's not as competitive. Another case is, hey, I'm not starting from scratch. I want to build a business from scratch and I want to create a content marketing strategy, right? Well, it's also an easy way to generate a practically semi-automatic content marketing strategy where you can create a podcast. That does not have to be directly linked to your brand, but it can be a general podcast on how to get clients in micro SaaS, for example, which is the example we are going to cover today. And you yourself can do a self-sponsored podcast in such a way that the users can acquire information, knowledge, stay up to date with the latest news in different fields, and you insert an advertisement that allows you in some way to also acquire new clients. Well, as you can see, there are quite a few interesting use cases. If you have one that you think could be used or have any questions, as always, leave what you think is appropriate in the comment section. And well, having said that, let's show a small example of how a podcast would look. We'll be back. In this case, this example I have here generated from n8n, okay? Basically, what I'm doing here is taking the n8n blog, and for each blog entry, I generate a podcast, okay? The latest blog is this article here, and we can listen. It's called, in this example, basically, it's a step further, okay? In this example, you will see that there is a small introduction where a summary of what will be seen is made. Then there is a header that comes with background music and the podcast begins, okay? What we will see today in the script, in the video mainly, is the final part. Therefore, two main parts could have been easily configured, but we won't cover them today, okay? So let's see if it listens.
All things workflow automation casts. Automation just got a whole lot easier. Imagine having unlimited workflows and no per-step fees at your fingertips. It's not a dream.
Okay.
It's n8n's.
And this is the initial summary that I mentioned, which is basically a summary of what will be seen later. Okay, go ahead.
Everyone from solo developers to large enterprises. Stick around as we explore the key benefits of this revolutionary approach and how you can innovate without limits.
This is n8n Automation Digest, the podcast that here a header would come in with different voice and background music, voiced to the best ideas in the world of automation, post on the official n8n blog.
Welcome to the n8n podcast, where we explore all things workflow automation.
And here would start the part where the two voices begin to speak, right? First the girl.
And the innovative tools that make our lives easier. Today, we're diving into an important topic, the recent changes to n8n's pricing structure.
And here's the part where the guy comes in, right? And up to here, well, more or less, it's about 6 or 7 minutes of audio that can be adapted. We'll see it a little later. But, well, so you have an example of how it would sound, how it would look, and what can be achieved, right? In the end, you can generate a channel for a client, completely white label, where you can create later automatically, weekly podcasts, daily, whatever you deem appropriate, right? Okay, so let's go directly to explain the workflow. Okay, we will start with the first block. First, a general introduction of each of the nodes, so that you understand more or less how the flow is, and then we can go into each of them for better understanding. Okay, we start with the first one, which is the generation of the newsletter based on Reddit. Okay, basically what we are doing. I have taken the microsas subreddit, okay? And what I do is, we can see it defined here. I extract all the last 100 posts, okay? Here the category I use are the new ones. because I'm interested in the most current ones. For example, we could launch this every day to keep acquiring the new 100. We need to look at exactly how many posts are generated on average to have a basis of how many are actually being generated. Here we could also go directly to the ones that are most voted, or the ones that are growing the most. And if, for example, you launched it every week or every day, it would show from that day what is being consumed the most, right? You need to set up the Reddit credentials. I'm not going to go into how to set up the credentials. I'm sure you can find a video, some explanation, if not the documentation itself. Okay. So once generated, this, in fact, I am going to run it to be able to see what the result it gives us. So Reddit gives us 100 comments, okay? Here we could see them with different parameters. In fact, the Reddit node gives us quite a few parameters. Then we will filter to choose only the ones that interest us the most. Here we have a code that basically selects the most upvoted from those 100 comments, right? And to not focus on everything, it cleans up the information a bit and doesn't give as many columns as before, but leaves the information we need, which is basically the title, the that is in the post, the URL to the post, the author, the votes, the number of comments, and some more information that you want, right? Once that's done, what we do is, in this node, we don't just want to take the 10 most voted, but we want to apply a filter. This is interesting, for example, if, hey, we're interested in a specific topic, right? So in this example, we have taken here, we have focused on the Microsoft subreddit. What I have seen is that many clients, there are many users, and what they do is ask or share experiences of how they acquired their first clients, right? And it can be very interesting, well, for those people who are starting their business, having a podcast where they explain how to get those first clients, and based on real examples that you have extracted from Reddit, right? Therefore, more interesting because they are not YouTube gurus explaining their tactics, but real people who are building things and can prove it, right? And they usually share it there. So then here we define the topic that interests us from the subreddit, so that it doesn't take all of them, okay? And here, what we do, we include this filter. We do it through an OpenAI node, okay? Here, the same, I am not going to explain exactly how the credentials were set up. I think that there are plenty of videos that explain it, and it's not necessary. And here you will find, a prompt of system prompt and a user prompt, which basically what we are looking for with this node is that this information structure, we will have to wait a little bit for this to load. Okay, we're back. We had a small technical problem, and basically I was explaining that what this node does is add two new fields to the post, okay? The two new fields, one is topic of interest, okay, which is basically a boolean that indicates if that feed, that comment refers to the topic we have defined earlier, okay, and it also includes another field which is the topic itself, okay. The response from OpenAI, as always, is within the content parameter, right? So we will have to extract, we are going to ask it to give this response in a JSON format, okay? Which will then allow us to extract the information to continue using it in our n8n flow, right? And that's exactly what we do in this code here. We take the content inside the parameter, the content field, right? And we convert it into a JSON file that's much easier to manage, right? So in the end, what it has done is OpenAI has returned the 10 items to us, right? Within these 10 items, there are some items that are related to the topic we have defined, and some that are not, right? So this sorts it, and here we can see that it has added two fields at the end, which is the topic, which is what we had defined earlier in the node, field. And then if this post refers to or has something to do with the topic we have defined, In this sense, well, look, this one, for example, the first is false, it has nothing to do, the second is true, and so on and so forth, okay? Then we include an if node that allows us to define or keep only those topics that are relevant for. So the idea now, in the next one, we do a loop where the idea is to extract the comments from that topic, from that post, okay? With the idea of having a larger context that is not just doing the summary or the newsletter based on the content of the post, but also on what users have added as comments, because often it's interesting to read the comments as you can see experiences on the same topic and also extract valuable information, right? So basically what we use here is we take or save the post to be able to use it later in the flow. We use another Reddit node where what we do is extract the comments for each of the items, okay? In this case for post 1. And we have extracted the 13 comments with the relevant information from each of the comments. As you can see here too, the information from the comments is quite extensive, okay? We will later keep what interests us the most, which is what we do here. Hey, from these comments, keep what most interesting, which is ultimately the post URL, the subreddit, the comment itself, right? So here we have for this post, well, the different comments much cleaner, right? And what we do next is that we make a list of all those comments and attach them to the post so that we have an item where we have the post with all the comments, and then we make a summary using another OpenAI node. Iyan na lang mga may siya mahahapari, where we also review a system prompt and a user prompt. You can experiment quite a bit here. The idea and the interest is to see what can be achieved with different configurations. Here, in the end, what I normally do is go to ChatGPT, explain a bit about what I want to achieve, and it makes a prompt proposal for me. I use it, look at the results, and if it convinces me or not, I give feedback and keep improving it. It will depend on what you're looking for, as this is quite adaptable and very fun to experiment with. Here, I encourage you to experiment as much as you can, because you can achieve much better results than I do, for sure, right? Once we have the summary of the posts with the comments, what we do is put it all together to make the newsletter. So we put it all together mainly so that we can then pass it to OpenAI and it has the general context, so the newsletter has some consistency, right? So if you talk about something at the beginning, you can connect it at the end. And here make the same. In fact, I realized that it's pinned here. Therefore, the example we will see won't be the current one, but an earlier one. But well, it will still be valid. And here, basically, is the same. We have a structure of a prompt, which I have defined one, but here everyone can play with whatever they want, just like with the models. I usually use Foro Mini because it gives me quite good results. It's quite cheap. In fact, a question, well, generating this flow can cost a few cents of dollars. And it gives quite good results. Let's see, if someone wants to experiment or wants something more specific, then obviously they can select the model that suits them best. And here, finally, what we do is we have a Gmail node that takes that newsletter and sends it to our Gmail, okay? Also a quite simple node. Here you have to define the email where we want to send it. Obviously also the Google credentials. And then here an important point is important for this example, but really this can be configured in different ways, right? In the end, we talked about having 3 blocks, and to connect these 3 blocks, what I did was use my own email. That is, I keep sending emails to myself and use it as a trigger for the next process. It could really all go one after the other, but I think it's interesting to do it this way because it allows you to have them completely separate. Also, it allows you to save the information in the email and see how it evolves, right? And you have traceability. Here, each person can adapt it to what suits them best. So just to keep in mind what the trigger for the next process will be, what I define here in the subject of the email is a part that will always be the same, which is newsletter to podcast. And to activate the next process, I will also use a Gmail node, which we will look at later. Where this Gmail node that will read emails with this subject that contain this part of the subject, right? And that will allow it to know, hey, I already have the curated content, and start the next process. I also take the opportunity to send the newsletter, which will obviously be needed for the next process, and we can see an example of how this newsletter would look. Okay, here, for example, this would be the final result of the newsletter. Okay, there's a small introduction, then an index, and then it goes into each of the posts I've analyzed, right? It gives a title, a brief definition, and then key points that have been extracted and are interesting, right? I also give you the links to be able to, and the basic information, and basically to be able to play around to create the newsletter that interests you the most. There are many templates for how to make newsletters with, right? You can look for another video, and surely you'll find things that are very interesting. Okay, so, okay, up to here is the first block, all right? Basically, as I mentioned in the first section, what we do is transform a Reddit thread into a newsletter. Okay, this template, this block can be found. I will leave it below in the video description. Okay, as a separate and important block. I will also leave where to find the 3 blocks together in one template. You will find the 3 blocks separately, completely free, and then so you can play, set up whatever is necessary, and then you will also find the complete block. Okay, I have divided it because that way, if someone today doesn't dare to do it all at once, they can experiment and play with one of the parts, or believe that it's just one of the parts they need, so that they can see which one suits them best. Okay, so now let's move on to the second block, all right? In the second block, basically what we do is, from the newsletter we have created, we generate the audio, all right? How do we do it? Well, first we create the script, all right? After the script, since we are going to do 2 voices, we will divide the script into those 2 voices, and we will send it to ElevenLabs. Okay, now we will go in to see exactly how ElevenLabs works and some more details, because I think it's quite interesting for us to know, so they can see what can be done and some basic notions of what they could achieve. Once generated, the voices are generated separately, which creates an audio file, and what we do with those audio files is we combine them, okay? And then we send it again to our Gmail, where we will have the script along with the audio, all right? So, come on, let's execute it so that it can be generated automatically. Okay. Basically, the first step it takes, as I mentioned, is to generate the script. To generate the script, here you will find an opening instruction. As always, you can adapt it. Importantly, this part here, in the end, we want to ensure that the output is always 2 voices, okay? Which are called voice 1 and voice 2. And as long as they have this same structure, which is voice 1, colon, and the text of voice 1, and then voice 2, colon, and the text of voice 2. This is important because it will be crucial later to differentiate these 2 voices, okay? And here we would already have the output. Agreed? So the script, let's look at it a bit more. Okay. I don't know if I can make this a little bigger, but well, here, if not, now here we have, for example, voice 1 and the text of that voice 1 does. And here, voice 2 and the text that voice 2 does. Here I am seeing, for example, an important mistake, which is to adapt the prompt so they don't call each other, don't greet each other by saying hello voice 1, for example, hello voice 2. This can basically be achieved by including an instruction, which I will do later. And so the updated template will no longer make this mistake, right? Okay, once we have the generated script, what we do is, we divide. We divide into segments, and each segment represents, first what voice 1 says, then what voice 2 says, then voice 1, and so on and so on, in such a way that we already have it organized and cleaner, right? And we put these elements in a loop where what we basically do first, we clean the content to ensure there are no strange things and that ElevenLabs is able to manage it properly, okay? And then, here we include an if node. What we do is separate when it has to go to voice 1 and when it has to go to voice 2, okay? We make sure, again, that there is nothing, that we haven't left anything that ElevenLabs cannot accept, okay? And then here we have the node that calls the ElevenLabs API that allows us to generate the voice. Basically, ElevenLabs, has quite a few different functionalities, but mainly the most interesting is that it has very good audio quality, providing audio from text. It is relatively expensive, it must be said, to generate in a file of about 5 or 6 minutes. It can cost, depending on the rate you have, but $2 or $3 depending on the models, but it can be somewhat expensive. I don't know, I haven't tried other alternatives at that cost with such good quality. I haven't found anything. If there is one, you can leave a comment to try it and see other alternatives. I think it's the most interesting. Let's pause for a moment. Let's visit the ElevenLabs page. Basically, to explore what will be important for our podcast, so it can be as personalized as possible. Basically, the most interesting thing is to try to find a voice that aligns with what your podcast wants to express. ElevenLabs has a huge variety of voices, different languages. Here you have the possibility to filter between, if you want, male voices, for example, of someone older. If you want the quality to be high, what type, for example, I want it for an advertisement, the language, so we are going to get voices in English, but even the accent, right? It is very interesting because it allows us to reach quite a high level of personalization, and I think that is the most interesting, or one of the most interesting things about ElevenLabs. I put too many filters, and just this one it did not find. But so that we can get an idea, you can explore, you can play, and above all, the most important thing. In the end, the audio is generated by 2 voices, so you have to try to balance the tone, the speed at which it speaks, and this involves exploring and playing. I can assume that we can use the same ones, but if you want to explore, you go to the voices section and you find different voices. Hey, there are voices that work better with some models or with others, okay? And you can experiment. You have to listen to the voice if you're interested and I want to try it out. You basically go hover over it.
No debo temer. El miedo es el asesino de la mente. El miedo es la pequeña muerte que trae la obliteración total.
And you can listen to an example, okay? If you want to use this voice later in the workflow, all you have to do is click here on the 3 dots and copy the voice ID, okay? Then we will have to integrate this voice ID here, okay, in the URL.
Basically, it's this parameter here, right?
Okay. If you don't want to get confused, I can use the same voices I'm using now, no problem. Just know that there is this alternative, okay? You also need to set up the credentials. We won't go into that here, but you can find a video. And then here you have everything set up so you don't have to touch anything. There are some parameters you can play with. If you're interested in going into more detail about the ElevenLabs API, the documentation is quite good. You can obviously use ChatGPT for support, but the parameters that are defined, I think, are sufficient to have a quality voice, and I wouldn't change anything apart from what we've defined about the type of voice, okay? Okay. Basically, this generates files that are saved on your hard drive. We use this node that enumerates each of the audios so that they can be assembled in the correct order, right? Then we have a code here that we will use later to generate. Basically, what we use is we generate a list of audios, and then we generate a text file that, as we can see in an example, will be better understood, okay? Which basically lists all the audios where I have them stored, okay? Well, from 0 to 36 in this case, right? And this will be useful later because we use a command node that is important to have this file, okay? We save this file, okay? And then we use this node that basically uses a library called FFmpeg, okay? Which is a library for audio and video management where it concatenates all these parts, okay? To concatenate, it calls to the text file we have generated, okay? And it generates a final audio, which is this final merge, and deletes all the other files. Now, in some way, so that trash doesn't accumulate in your folder, and then it generates the final file. Here is an important point, and it is that this library cannot be used, or at least I have not managed to use it, or I have only been able to use it either in a local n8n instance or in a self-hosted one that is on your own server. I haven't been able to use it in third party. I'm sure there's some API that allows you, but I haven't explored it. It's the usual, right? If you find something you think is interesting and can share, please leave it in the comments, okay? Once the file is done, we upload it and combine it. We create a Gmail email where we upload the attachment. Okay, we also upload the script, which will be important because later we will use it to make the description and the title of the podcast, okay? And then we give it, just like we did before, a name in the subject that is easy to identify to later trigger the next process, okay? Okay, so we move on to the last of the blocks. Okay, the block, basically what this block does, hey, we already have our audio file, it's time to upload it to Spotify. Okay, to upload it to Spotify, you have to do a manual process, which you only need to do once. From there, we won't have to, you can forget about it. In fact, there are several manual points in this. Surely it is the simplest part of the workflow, but it requires more prior preparation. Okay, here what we will have to do on one hand is generate our folder structure of GitHub, okay? Configure them to be publicly accessible, and then set up our GitHub credential to be able to edit through n8n. Basically, this is the Spotify page that allows you to generate or register your podcast. Okay, here you will have to register, okay? And in this case, I log in with my Spotify account. At a new show, finds an existing shows added somewhere else, and here enter your RSS link, which we will generate now. So to generate this link, how I do it, I have a GitHub project, okay, which is this one here where I am testing different podcasts that I am creating, right? So to start a new project, you basically click on create new file, okay? You name it, they have it organized, for example, n8n YouTube, okay? And here you create your RSS file, okay? Commit change, okay. And you will then have to create this RSS file. I will also leave an example in the description, okay, of the structure it needs to have. But well, there are certain fields where you have to describe the title of the podcast, the link, the description of your podcast, a series of information. And once this is done, okay, then you will also have to give or create a profile picture, okay? And you save it with the name you deem appropriate. And here, the RSS file, you have to determine, well, what this image is called so it can be found, okay? Once all this is configured, okay? Well, you will have your link of, you will have to make this folder public on GitHub, okay? And then you will be able to access it from outside. And then you have to follow this structure here. I will give an example. Okay, it will be this one here, right? I will leave an example in the comments so you can, okay? But basically this URL here plus your user plus your folder plus the main branch, okay? The folder inside of the project and then rsxml, okay? And when you do this in the section we saw before, if you have everything configured, it will recognize it. And as you keep updating, they will update directly. If there's a description you don't like, it's no problem. You just go directly to the file, click edit, and make the necessary changes. You delete, for example, the chapter here, then going back to the n8n flow. Okay, we have already set up our Spotify creator account. We have set up our GitHub. And now we are going to create or upload the podcast, okay? We will have received an email from the previous blog. Exactly, with this title, okay? And here the script, okay? And this is what we will use as a trigger for the next process, okay? So in the next process, basically what we are going to do is create a description. If we go to Spotify, well, each episode usually has a description here, okay? And it has a title, okay? And that's exactly what we're going to do with these nodes here, okay? It's very simple, quite simple. It also has some room for improvement. As always, we're going to run it so we can also see the results a bit. Okay, I have basically recognized this GitHub node. There, it doesn't allow me to see it. Okay, this is very fast, as you can see. What it does is search this part of the subject, okay? Therefore, it has found the file, it has taken the attachment, generates the description, okay? This then saves it, the title, the description, and the audio file. This node is not necessary, it's the old one, I'll correct it, okay.
Borrell.
Okay, let's run it again. For the combine, there are two guides to have on one hand the attachment, right, and the title, the description. Yeah, and what it does next is upload it to we use Google Drive. Today I am using Google Drive. You could use another service, but basically it's to have a link for access to your audio. Okay, so matter of here what we do basically is upload this attachment to Google, right? You have to set up your credentials, etc., to Google Drive. Then we make it public. That's important so that later GitHub, when we upload and update it, they can read, okay? Then we go into GitHub, and here you will have to describe these folders we talked about earlier. You will have to specify where your RSS XML file is, and then what it does is download the complete file, okay? It converts or processes it to make it easier for n8n, okay? And then what it does is edit it, which basically means adding an item. Okay, one more item, okay? Including the title, including the description, the URL to the audio from Google Drive, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and then update your file on GitHub. Okay. Once the RSS file is updated, it takes a little while to appear on the platforms. It takes between 10 and 15 minutes. Don't worry, it will eventually show up. Okay. Let's see. And this is a bit of a summary of everything. Well, not a summary. It has been quite long. So a bit to finish. All this information can be found in the useful links. All the workflows can be found in the comments. In follow or ask, either in the comments or follow me on Twitter. You can also see the link in the description. Subscribe to the channel to receive more information. If anyone wants to get started with all this podcasting and podcast decision making with n8n and want to use ElevenLabs, I will also leave a link to ElevenLabs in the description, which is an affiliate link. If you use it, you help me a lot. It costs you nothing, and it's a way to also reward the work if you've learned something. And not much more. This is just a foundation to later create the podcasts you need. And well, if you create something, share it. I'd be delighted to listen to it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay updated on new episodes or new points. You can also write to me if you are interested in something specific or if you think there's something interesting in a use case. I'm always open to hearing proposals. And thank you very much for making it this far. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.